Hey guys, Ark here, bringing to you Chapter 2, Episode 6 of my Learning Night Elf series. This episode we're going to be covering the Night Elf versus Orc matchup, particularly the Mass Tier 1 with Keeper and Alchemist strategy versus Orc. This is a strategy that's been used quite often in the last, at least since I've been back, but there's been a couple of big tournaments that have happened that it's been showcased a lot as well. But it's a very common strategy for this matchup. Arguably, probably the most consistent and reliable strategy. But there's a lot of intricacies with it that aren't really apparent, especially for older players that are familiar with how Night Elf was played before. It's definitely a different strategy and takes some getting used to if you're more confident in your Demon Hunter play. It takes a little while to actually get accustomed to this new strategy. So I wanted to make a video covering that just because it's also a strategy that took me a little while to really understand and start using to main effect. No, took me a while to get used to using it. I guess I don't exactly know the phrase I'm looking for, but it's there somewhere. So we're just gonna jump into the game. This is actually from the next NetEase esports something tournament. It was just last week. This is a game of Moon versus Fly, or I'm sorry, excuse me, Moon versus Lin. So I did an episode earlier that I uploaded. It was Chapter 1, Episode 13, which covered the build order in this episode. So this is a build order that I don't really recall ever seeing when I used to play like 10 plus years ago. But it's a very, very common build order in the Night Elf vs Orc matchup now. So check out that video if you want to know the specific details for it. But I'm just going to keep my screen and speed up the replay a little bit, and you guys can see exactly what I covered on that video is actually the case. So we'll be looking at the wood income right here. So when it hits 100 wood, we're going to see a Hunter's Hall. Once you hit 40 after that, you're going to see a Moonwell. And then once you hit 20 out of 20, you're going to build a shop, cancel the shop after the wisp gets built, and now you'll be at 21 out of 20. So we'll see that here in just the next second. There we go, and he canceled it. So right here, we're at the start of the Chapter 1, Episode 13, where I started to leave off. In this game in particular, we do see the Blade Master harassing right away. Not totally uncommon in this map, but it's definitely not a standard play, I would say. And from Moon's perspective, he knows that he went for a fast shop because of his inventory and the fact that he ran over at the start. So whether that means the grunt was delayed or not, usually it's delayed a little bit, but more than likely he's probably assuming that the grunt was delayed and he's actually teching pretty quickly behind this, which is definitely the case. So in terms of where you're at in this point, so his Huntress is going to get delayed because this Moonwell was canceled. He's going to end up still going for that third Moonwell. In this game, Moon does actually fast expand before teching, and that's definitely one of the benefits of this Keeper Mass Tier 1 strategy, is that there's so many options available to you. You can go for a fast expansion before teching to Tier 2. You can go for it on your way to Tier 2. You can go for it after you've established like 40 plus food of hunts with upgrades. There's just so many different variations that you can make use of that it's very difficult for the Orc player to really know exactly how he needs to respond. So scouting is hugely important for him. And so anything you can do to make it even more difficult is just always good. So essentially what we're seeing on this map, it's very common to creep level 2 on this map. And then at some point, like either right at Tier 2 for the Orc, or right after level 2 on your Keeper, that's where you'd go harass. But generally in this strategy, your first important thing. So if I was giving you guys homework for what to practice to make use of this strategy, homework number 1 or assignment number 1 is practice this build order. This is probably one of the harder build orders for the Night Elf to do, because in particular, this Hunter's Hall and the Moonwell will be going down while you're Ancient of War creeping. Generally, anything you add stepwise to Ancient of War creeping makes it a little bit more difficult. So as you're reviewing this episode and making a list of what you need to do, practice this build order versus a computer. That's step number 1. Until you can do this build order perfectly versus a computer, you're always playing from behind. because so much of it depends on having that early Huntress timing, which canceling the Moonwell, in this case, it was a pretty big investment to cancel the Moonwell because you fast teched. So I'm not 100% sure who got the better end of that trade, but I would definitely say that fast teching does not equal the, or fast teching with late grunts and stuff does not equate to the canceled Moonwell, just my personal opinion, but always make sure that you can do this build order perfectly, because you're only hurting yourself if you can't. The next most important thing is have a plan for whether you're going to harass right away after AOW creeping, or whether you're going to creep level 2 and then go harass, or whether you're going to prioritize creeping and wait until your opponent is tier 2 before harassing. Those are really the three things that are most important, because one of those three things needs to be done. The reason why it needs to be done, and we can break down those three things. So number one was harass right after your first AOW creeping. It depends heavily, I'm going to pause this actually. It depends heavily on what map it is, but it's perfectly okay as you're learning the strategy to just follow the same protocol every single map. That's perfectly okay until you get the hang of it. The reasons why you might want to harass right after your AOW creeping is, let's imagine we're on Last Refuge. If we're on that map, creeping level 2, you're going to get a second static item for the most part. But oftentimes your opponent is going to be right there with you harassing if you creep level 2, which essentially means that your archer is very likely to fall, because it's around that time where it's right before nighttime, so it's hard to keep that archer alive. And so that you're basically possibly looking at one archer down immediately. So there's not a whole lot of value. The creeps that you can kill for level 2 are so fast to do that you can finish it off pretty quickly. So you can come back and it doesn't take that much time to get caught back up creeping wise. The benefits to harassing is that if you can evade the Grunt Scout or the Blademaster Scout, you can get to his base while his Blademaster is on the other side of the map, which essentially guarantees you at least 2 peon kills, which means that you're going to be level 2 just solely off your harass. So that's kind of the benefits of it. And on Last Refuge, it's a map that I do like to harass at level 1. Then let's jump into that. So creeping level 2 and then harassing. The benefit there is that you're going to be able to start harassing once your first Huntress comes out, so you potentially can get grunt kills. Another thing it means is that you can jack your opponent and prevent him from creeping and then steal his camps, which essentially means that his Shadow Hunter is going to have less camps available to creep up once he's tier 2. So benefits there. Another benefit, the third thing you can do is just creep solely to level 3 before harassing. The benefit there is that level 3 is a big power spike for you, whether you go Entangle level 2 or Trance. Trance is more common. It essentially gives you the power to heavily harass their base. If he's not there, you can go after burrow kills. If he is there, it gives you a pretty good strength at actually picking off the grunts and everything. So there's a lot of benefits to it. The most important thing is that you pick one of those and you stick to it. You want to have transition plans in place. I guess you can't always get a bunch of peon kills when you harass, but always have something in the back of your mind for what happens when this doesn't go successful. But yeah, the most important thing is pick one of those 3 and stick to it, and until you get the hang of the strategy. And so, Panisarshi, looks like we have a subscribe while I'm doing this video. Thank you so much. So in this game, Moon opted to prioritize creeping. I would say that this is really a map choice, as well as the fact that he's fast expanding. So essentially, no matter what you do, when the orc is going to be tier 2, you're going to want to be at his side of the map. You want to try and slow down the Shadow Hunter creeping. So he's essentially going to creep a camp that... Oh, you know what? Let me tell you a quick timing trick as well. So orc tier 2, if they tech standard with their 1 burrow tech and everything, this is roughly when your Shadow Hunter gets starting to build. So the third and fourth star in the map here, that's roughly the time where the opponent just hits tier 2. This 4th or 5th star is generally the time that the Shadow Hunter comes out. So just keep that in mind. And Moon, I'm sure, knows that as well. So he's creeping a small camp because he knows when the Shadow Hunter comes out, he's going to be able to finish this camp and be on his opponent's side of the map. So he does Wisp Scout, confirms what's happening, but we're going to see him run over to the Orc base. This, regardless of one of those three options that you choose, you want to be over on the Orc side of the map or creeping out an expansion at the same time. The reason why I specified creeping out an expansion is because if you go for some of the expansion timings like we're seeing here, that it might be finished by the time this comes, you either need to slow down the Shadow Hunter creeping or get a big boost to your army. And a second economy is a big boost to your army. So we see for the 5th star, the 5th star is hit, so the Shadow Hunter is out. And he is basically making a beeline straight for where he is most likely creeping. So this, regardless of those three options, you want to be at this point in the game regardless. And so we get a pretty good harass here as well. So I'm going to speed forward through that. And so at this point, he's about to hit tier 2. His Tree of Life just finished. So once he finishes this harass, he could either continue harassing, creep, or obviously creep out his expansion. The expansion is, of course, going to be a big boost to his army overall. He already stalled out the Shadow Hunter quite a bit, picked off a grunt, delayed his creeping, stole the creep camps as well eventually. So it's perfectly okay for him to run back here. It's really safe. Creep out this Tree of Life because he's hurt the Orc army so badly already. He's also going to pick up his second hero as soon as he hits tier 2, which leads me to my next point. If you want to fight with mass tier 1 versus the Orc army, hero levels are one of the most important things. There's a lot of cases where you might lose a fight as the Night Elf and think, oh wow, there's like nothing I could do. This fight is impossible. I just need really good micro. It's probably not the case. In this matchup in particular, or in general, Night Elf relies heavily on hero levels. It's usually not the case where a fight is lost due to micro. Or it's painfully obvious. If there's ever any type of doubt what it is, it's probably not micro. So in this case here, he's getting high hero levels. It's going to be very important in this game. It's very important in this matchup as well as Night Elf matchups go in general. Hero levels just play such a huge role. So always keep that in mind, that creeping is one of the most important things that you can get good at. So efficiently creeping, stuff like that, that's very important. So with that said, what we're seeing here is going to be pretty typical. So they're both, the Night Elf is going to wants to start transitioning into archers because that's where a lot of their DPS comes from, past 50 food. The Huntresses are good for a body block, but a lot of the damage is going to be coming from those long-ranged archers. He's also going to prioritize creeping because, again, creeping is so important for this army. But what we're seeing here, so he's got his expansion down. He's going to throw down a second AOW. He's got basically this timing for the second AOW is going to come at the point where you don't have a bunch of gold sync items to invest in, and you're going to start ramping up your production. So his expansion just finished. He's going to start getting a sudden surge of income. He's going to need that second AOW for production. And so that's essentially what we're going to see here. We're not going to watch all of this game. I basically wanted to just cover the key highlights. So at this point here, he's in a very good position. He's going to continue pumping out units. He's going to continue building upgrades, and he's basically just going to creep and engage the Orc as I guess the game goes on. Not a whole lot of technical things going through his mind at this point, in terms of like timings or certain points that he wants to hit. So I just want to recap exactly what we covered. So the first most important thing, say it with me, is your build order. If you can't do this build order perfectly against a computer while AOW creeping, you're not ready to do this yet. I'll say that pretty much for any of my build orders in general, whether you play Night Elf, whether you play Orc, Human, Undead, if you can't do them playing against a computer, you're not ready to do them against real players. Now, I will say, though, that if you can do these perfectly, you're probably at a very high skill level compared to most of the population that play the game. So keep that in mind, that it's not a waste of time to really perfect your build orders. I know it may seem silly practicing it against a computer, but it is one of the most important aspects of playing the game, is to hit your timings, or at least your opening timings, really hit them well, and yeah. So that's the first most important thing. The second most important thing is going to be one of those three things: whether you creep right after your AOW, whether you continue creeping right after you AOW creep, and basically creep up until you want to harass the orc right when he hits tier 2 with his Shadow Hunter coming out, or you harass right after you finish AOW creeping, or you harass right after hitting level 2. Those are the three things that you have to decide in this matchup. There's right and wrong answers. Usually they're dependent on the map, as well as what you're planning on doing in terms of expo timing. But for the purpose of learning it and getting comfortable with it, it's perfectly okay to just pick one and go with it every single game until you get the hang of it. The next important thing is during nighttime, the first nighttime when it hits the 4-star mark, that's roughly the time the Shadow Hunter is going to get out. The 5-star, somewhere between the 4 and 5-star mark is where the Shadow Hunter is going to be creeping. You want to be at the orc, slowing down his creeping here, or expanding, or creeping your gold mine for the expansion. Whether your expansion has already been built or not, you can kind of fit that in there depending on how exactly you want to play this strategy. The fourth most important thing then is continuing to creep up your second hero. You want that high hero levels. You want to get, eventually you want to secure an expansion to continue pumping out units with upgrades. So with that said, guys, that's going to cover this episode. It's kind of a longer episode in general. This strategy has so many different variations. There's a lot of different things you can do with it. The important thing, though, is that you stick to it and figure out exactly how you want to play it, and just keep practicing that until you can really get it down. Because there's so many different variations, it's really easy to start changing things up, but then it makes it really difficult for you to truly understand, I guess, points where you're strong, where you're weak, and everything. And when you're learning the game, it's really important that you play consistently. So again, with that being said, that's going to be the end of this episode here, guys. Still kind of figuring out exactly how I want to do these episodes in Chapter 2. So I gotten a lot of good feedback so far with kind of these more in-depth talks of specifically like how you want to play things throughout the game. So again, if you guys like these types of videos, please keep letting me know. And also, if you don't like them, please let me know as well. Let me know what you don't like so I can change it up. Or if you have ideas or suggestions or anything, please let me know. But with that said, we will call it quits for this episode. So thank you. Have a good night.